Welcome back, everyone.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the AfterCon podcast.
Yep. Tonight we're going to be talking with you about meeting different members of the Vampire Diaries.
And
TV shows.
Yes, which I'm actually in the mood to rewatch again. I saw a top 10 list of the best vampire TV shows. And I was like, Buffy, obviously number one. I think the Vampire Diaries was number 4 or 5, and it oddly got beat by the originals. I forget if the originals was 2 or 3. It makes sense though.
Accurate.
When you watch the originals, I got you on that. You do realize by the end of it, not the whole show, the first couple seasons blow, but that last season's really good.
Oh, there are only 4 seasons of that?
I think it's just 4, yeah.
But you know, we've never really sat down and watched all the way through is True Blood, but that's up there too.
I got through the first episode of True Blood, and it was like torture porn. And that is how I guess I would describe the first episode. And I was like, I don't know, this is really
interesting.
But I was very young when I watched that first episode, and by very young, probably like 20 something. And I agree. That is one where I'd kind of like to go back and watch. The only thing though that I've ever seen Anna Paquin in is X-Men. So
I just rewatched that first one.
The original X-Men?
Yeah, I was trying to get my kid into it, Harrison.
Didn't do it? It's too old.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. You should try them with the new X-Men 97 animated series that just came out.
But we're getting off topic.
The people love it. Hey, this is important hot topics, Kayla. But yes, the Vampire Diaries. So that was back when the CW was the only channel making pop culture television shows.
Correct.
And they had everything.
Time in life.
Right. And so going to a convention of any kind, you were lucky if you were seeing anything that was airing on the CW. And again, at that time, the Vampire Diaries was just huge.
Right.
I'll say for women, but there were the male audience. I mean, Nina Dobrev is very attractive.
Sure, that's true.
You know?
So Creation Entertainment, like we mentioned previously, is where we go to those supernatural conventions that they put those on. But they also put on Vampire Diary conventions. We haven't gone to those, but
no,
we've seen the cast in different locales, so to speak.
Right. And I think when they first started doing the Vampire Diaries conventions through Creation Entertainment, I think they had like Damon and Stefan. And we've kept track of them over the years, but it always seems like it's just varying members of the side cast, which I'm not about to take a flight just to see the side characters. Right.
That's what supernatural ones. You always have Sam and Dean present.
They always make it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Even after the show's been off the air for a couple of years now. So, I wonder how long they can keep that up for.
Ever.
Right. Anyways, so
yeah. So what was
our first convention ever was to Atlanta at DragonCon, and I think both had gotten photographs with Ian Somerhalder and Paul Wesley. You just did Ian. Yeah, I think I got a duo with both.
Nice.
I did actually, because I still had hair, and I can picture that photo, and I look at it and I hate it every time. That's the thing.
My hair is not good either.
Wow. Those photos are great memories to remember that it happened, but I honestly feel like to this day, and you know which photo I'm talking about, I've only ever been to a convention and had one good photo. Literally one good, and they must have photoshopped that thing on the fly. We'll talk about that another time, but
so it must just be the app that they used just to make
right. It had to be, and I think also the fact that it wasn't. I forget if it was black and white or sepia or something, but either way they buffed out all my acne, and not that I had a lot, But if there was any, they buffed that right out.
Yeah, they did.
But
Yeah.
with the photography that you're typically getting at these conventions, they don't do that. So you got to go looking your best.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Um,
yeah, and we lucked out because you found, and we had no idea what we were doing for our first convention, so we did the photo ops, we stood in line for those. We went to a couple panels as
yeah,
well.
I
Interesting.
think I feel like so that was our first convention. So I feel like we did a panel at this convention, this first Dragon Con. I know we did a panel with it was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer panel, but it was starring Spike and Cordelia
Yep.
from that show. And then I know that we did another panel.
Another panel. We did a Vampire Diaries one.
Okay, so we did that, and that probably would have just been. I think those were the only two actors or actresses from the show that were there.
As far as I recall. That was when all
Yeah.
the hype was going on, where like in Summerhalder was like potentially up to play the part of that one book. 50 Shades of Grey. Remember he was
Oh, he was up for that part.
Yes, and I was so nervous. And
Yeah.
I was like, should I ask? And then I obviously didn't.
Right.
Better than me.
You know what I liked about conventions back then, and I think the Dragon Cons and some of your smaller conventions, you can still get this. You don't at bigger conventions. The time you get to actually ask them questions and like the speed that the photos and the autographs take place. It's like if there's a huge line for somebody that's really big, you're lucky to get to say hi, and some actors are too kind where they want to give every person in line the time of day.
Jared
But Jared Padalecki, then everything takes so long, and the risk with that is you might be somebody who's further back in line, and because that person was so kind to the first 50 people, not everybody gets a chance to go through.
Right.
But back then, we definitely did have kind of the opportunity to ask more questions. We were just both extremely shy. You know, you realize that you do need a little bit of liquid courage sometimes to.
And
There's
and it's good
shock.
about that because they're allowed.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy liquor right there in the convention, which helps.
Yeah, it does.
So sometimes
But yeah,
you can't do that in California. Comic-Con
right.
is dry. It's very frustrating.
Correct. I mean, there's ways, but they do make it a challenge.
Fake swords, we can see.
But we like correct. We like a good challenge. They're not checking water bottles.
Another plus to Vegas as well. You can do anything there.
Correct. Vegas is kind of a free for all. But yeah, so we met them there and we had our photos taken. And that was. I mean, again, at the time it was like the shock value of you being at your first convention and you're meeting people who are your favorites at the time. So it was.
Yeah.
It was, and there are a ton of other people at this convention that we liked. But then I think it was just a year or two later, the Vampire Diaries was still very much on the air. We went to San Diego Comic Con, and this would have, I assume, been our first San Diego Comic Con as well.
Could have been.
I have the picture frame downstairs, so this is one where they do a drawing, right, for the various TV shows that you wait in line for, and I forget what you drew, what TV show you drew out of this, like, literal hat that they have.
I don't even know. It could I don't even know.
And maybe you did too, but yeah, I know that I drew one for Vampire Diaries, and maybe we both did.
I have the originals, I think. So
okay.
That year.
And so again, you go through this round table filled with the cast, and that's a little bit more exciting because there's only like I think 30 to 50 people who are drawn at a place that has 10 to 20,000 plus people. I mean, the odds aren't insane, and we've lucked out and gotten something every time. I think when we've gone to the San Diego Comic Con, a couple of times we didn't necessarily get something that we wanted at all.
We at least
but you get something. Right. which is shocking. Now, you talk about a fun game. Waiting in that line is the most fun and anxiety-ridden game you could ever play.
Right. And then just like
'Cause
getting up there towards the end and you're like racing and
is there any left in that bucket to begin with?
yeah.
Right. But to be fair, like when you're drawing out of those buckets, we've never actually drawn out of a bucket and not gotten an entry ticket. Like it's like almost every ticket's a winner, but they're not. Somebody is drawing out of those buckets and they're losing. But we've had them be empty, and so we've had to go to like a fallback show or our fallback's fallback. But so with this one, now I have a signed poster with the cast of the Vampire Diaries that's framed. That's still not hanging on a wall. Gotta figure out where to put that. But what was cool about this was actually I want to take this back because this has to do with the airport. But before I dive in there, I want to circle back because we missed what was the most exciting
Jumping ahead
thing.
now. I'll let him get there.
I was jumping ahead. Yeah, you feel free to reel me back in. But that's right. We're leaving that first DragonCon convention where we just met Ian and we met Paul, and we're at the airport waiting for our flight and we're grabbing food.
Wait, you're also skipping again.
Am I skipping ahead? Well, then you tell the story.
That night, we had our meet and greet with the...
Oh!
Remember?
Man.
Yeah.
Time flies. What's it, 12? It's been like 12 years.
Again, our first convention, and DragonCon, they haven't done that since. Like, we haven't seen any meet and greet type situations.
No, never.
And they put on a meet and greet, and we got tickets to go to like a little like room at a hotel type of situation and have some drinks with a few members of the cast of the originals. One being Joseph Morgan, his dad on the show was that Sebastian
Roche, I think. I'm gonna go Roche.
Brothers,
a couple of the brothers, which are lesser known actors, but
I was way too nervous. That was the first time I was enclosed in a room with.
And I had to have actually been like 19 or 20 because I wasn't actually old enough to drink.
We're not allowed to drink legally
while we were in there. When there's a will, there's a way. I made it work.
You did. And, thankfully, you were there because I lost all feeling, so I couldn't speak. But you did.
Right. Yeah. Well, this was, man, we're going to just, pretend that I'm going to retell everything. No, I'm just kidding. But with this, there were like maybe 20 people in the room with the cast of the originals. Yeah. And like you said, we were in shock. We paid for this.
Right.
And this was also, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say it was almost like an online little raffle that we happened to, we still paid for it, but I think we had to get like an entry to pay for it or something like this. They don't do it anymore. And I'm just going to say it. Outside of the cast of the originals, we were the prettiest people in the room. And that was something that we just really didn't even think about until like later on. And you go to more of these conventions and we just didn't know how to talk. And you see these other people who are just hounding them. Like when we went up to talk to Joseph Morgan, which we inevitably did after a while of doing nothing, like we just kind of crept up in the circle and we're eavesdropping on this conversation. But I mean, like they're like in like a 5-foot circle just being hounded by crazy fans.
Right.
Which we're not that. And the question that I asked, I did ask a question. Man, that was a bold day for me. And I do remember the question. I asked them, why are there scenes when you guys are driving when you could just run everywhere? Because when the show starts, and any vampire show, it's a common feature. They have super speed. And you see a lot of the running to and from, but then there are times when they're just driving from place to place, and it's like, okay. Because the further the show goes on, it's more.
They're this right away because then whatever would have happened wouldn't happen, Like, what was it, like?
Right.
Dying or somebody getting staked.
Right. And their answer was, I mean, it was the best answer you could have expected. Their answer was they do that because if they ran everywhere, there would never be time for dialogue, right? And it makes sense. It's like, okay, like you need these moments where they're not just in a room, like they're traveling and they can have some personal,
Protecting themselves.
correct, yeah.
Very
So it's twofold. Um, but yeah, that was very, very exciting. All right, now, Amy, move on to what honestly is my favorite story to tell, really about you, um,
sorry.
on the airport ride. So we're at the airport leaving Atlanta,
The next
and we're the next morning, yep, and we've got some time to kill. So we're grabbing food, and then lo and behold, we turn around, and who's sitting down like four tables away from us at the same little open restaurant is Ian Somerhalder. Now,
at this point in time, he's
we
the love of my life, I assume.
correct. And we've learned a lot since then about like how to meet and interact with celebrities in an appropriate way, which I'll throw out the window. Well, I mean, Tom Welling is a prime example of that for another day. But
Yeah. Well, you meet your idols.
when you meet your idols, yeah, all principle goes right out the window.
You were like
But
stuck.
I was like, is it weird? And I know it's weird, and that person's eating and they want their privacy. They just got done off of like 2 or 3 days of press and, putting on their happy face for for customers, really. And I went over and I forget exactly what I said, but I said something along the lines of like, hey, like me and my sister are really big fans, and she's too nervous to come over and say hi. In You know what? What does he do though? He stands up, he gets up, walks over to our table, shakes your hand, says hi,
Yes, he was
talks to us.
nice, and that was a very good brother move, Jake. Yes,
Yeah,
yeah, he
yeah.
came over and said hi, and
I
I
did that sober, for the record.
yeah,
Um, so it was just, again, it goes to show that, like, should I have done that at the end of the day? Probably not, but he handled it so well.
he did, yeah.
Um,
Which is
and we were I think,
they need to be with their fans because otherwise they won't be fans no more.
right. It's tough. And you know what? They put themselves in that situation by doing the shows. So we do this, um, and then we're gonna go back in time now, and we're at Comic-Con. Am I missing anything? Are there gaps in our experiences meeting
I think you're
any of
good.
the Vampire Diaries cast? Okay. So we get their autographs at Comic Con. We're happy. It's been a blessed weekend at San Diego Comic Con, which is just a whole experience of a vacation.
Right.
And we're at the airport again, and we're walking by some bar, and there's just the whole cast of the originals, just like every average people,
Right.
just
Just all at
sitting in there, and
restaurant
we're
bar
just
or the
waving
airport
and
bar.
saying hi. And I mean, we're not doing any of those things. No, I think we actually just respected their privacy, didn't we? I don't think we actually went.
No, yeah, we didn't go there.
Yeah, things that I would have gone back and done. That would have been baller moves. I should have gone up to the bar and bought them around a drink. Now, here's the thing: that would have done nothing for me, probably because they wouldn't know until after I was gone. But I would know, and there's a lot to be said about that.
Yes.
But anyways, and I feel like we've seen Ian Somerhalder walking through the airport before.
Well,
Outside
and
of that, a
that
couple of
that
times.
same time we saw him and Nikki Reed. They pulled up to the airport. His then or his
Nikki Reed's
yeah,
his wife
he was
now.
also a
Yeah,
vampire on Twilight, one of the sisters.
yeah.
But they pulled up right before us and walked into the air that same day. Walked into the airport
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
went through check or security and all that jazz.
Security, I think it
Fun fact,
was.
they fly coach just
Yeah,
like probably back to Canada.
probably. Um. So yeah, just Awesome. And the thing with the Vampire Diaries is that it is such a good show. I think I know you've rewatched it a couple of times. I think I've seen it now probably 3 to 4 times. And that show is like a lot of shows. A lot of shows that were on the CW where they start off so incredibly good and then they aren't. But then they end really strong. And like that, I think that is a show where I could go back to it always, and you re-feel that magic of you really like that cast of characters, and you want to see what they're doing now. And unfortunately, Ian Somerhalder has at least taken a temporary retirement from acting
Yeah.
publicly. He's just off doing green things now. For the
And
environment. I know he's put out a couple of documentaries, like Kiss the Ground was one he put out a year or so ago. Um, and he's just living off the land. And I'm sure that won't last forever because unless he can continue to make money in that way and investments, like him and Paul Wesley have their brother's brand bourbon, um, which we tried. And I mean, I enjoyed. You don't like bourbon, but
I don't like bourbon. It was disgusting, but more power. I'm sure it's good for the bourbon drinkers out there.
yes. And then Paul Wesley is now starring in one of our new favorite genres. I'm just gonna call Star Trek a whole genre. Um, but yeah, he's starring as Kirk in Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And we've only seen him a couple of times in the show, but yeah, he does a great job. And I think the story that I don't know that I don't not believe it from a coincidental level, but he said that he ran into
All right.
uh yeah, I hate me for not thinking of his name.
The original actor who
Uh,
played Captain.
yeah, that should bug me, and it does bug me. William Shatner. He said that right after he found out that he got the part, he was on a plane heading somewhere, and who on his plane and sitting next to him. That's where I'm like, some of these coincidences. I'm like, are they really? But William Shatner was sitting on the plane next to him, and they had a good conversation, and I think that's really cool. I hope that takes off. Um, for him. It'd be cool to see him get it's hard to see him get a younger story in that role because, I mean, 50 years ago, I mean, young William Shatner did that. So I don't know that we'll see him in any more of a cameo-based role, maybe throughout Strange New Worlds, but we'll see.
Right. That's fair. Time will tell.
Yeah. Um, but thanks again, everybody. Camera trouble, camera trouble. It's a new setup.
It's
A
a
new
new
setup.
setup.
But
Give us a little grace here. Yeah.
give
But
give a guy grace. But yeah, is there anything else, Kayla, that we want to
no,
touch
I
that we want to
think
touch on?
meeting the cast of Vampire Diaries is definitely worth it. We've met some side characters. We met the main cast. We've never met Nina Dobrev, but I definitely worth it if you get the chance to.
Yeah, she might. I wonder if she's her and her brother. Her brother also, I can't think of his name. I think he also stepped away from acting to go actually
From
help in
acting, yeah.
third world countries, which is a bit of a difficult one for me to say apparently. Um, uh, Jeremy, also known as Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen. Yeah, I believe he went off and did that. But we've met Matthew Davis. Matthew Davis is um, a really just nice guy. I think he made an unfortunate. Um, I'm 98 degrees sure that I have a no that I have a picture with him from one of the more recent conventions that we went to. It was either this last,
Okay.
I think it was this last Dragon Con actually that we were at. Um, but I mean, we haven't met like a ton of the Vampire Diaries cast. I think we met a good chunk of the originals, but not a good chunk of the Vampire Diaries cast because I know that we never met Kat Graham. We haven't met Candace King. And I mean, for the most part, like that's the main cast outside of like Zach Rohrig. That's really it. Michael Trevino, but we haven't met him.
No.
So yeah, that was, I think back when I think that was that time when these types of things, like these shows, were taking off with conventions, and we were still figuring out that landscape, and we weren't really being proactive about who's going where, who to meet, and all these things. Right. But we're very excited for this year's Dragon Con. We're going to be meeting some Harry Potter folks that are going to be checking some stuff off of our bucket list. So
They are.
it's going to be a great time. But yeah. So thanks everybody again for joining us today. We will be back hopefully within the next week to talk to you about some more interesting experiences with other people and celebrities and shenanigans that we got up to at other conventions. So yeah,
And as always,
we will.
well,
Yeah,
as always,
you close.
Please reach out on Instagram at AfterCon. DM us for any questions that you may have, or anything you'd like us to discuss. But yeah, thank you so much, and we will talk soon.